Hello and welcome everybody to today's webinar. My name is James Cousins and I'm the analyst manager here at Rapid Insight, where we like to advance the slides just a little too quickly. Today we're happy to be talking to you about the 4 most common barriers that we've witnessed among our users, the barriers to business intelligence and how to overcome them and to achieve more efficient, more effective business intelligence. We like to jump straight into the presentation when we have the opportunity. And so today what you can expect from us is a brief word about ourselves and of course the company that we represent. But then from there, a quick overview of the business intelligence barriers themselves, followed by what we see as the problems most commonly associated with those barriers, as well as, and most critically, the solutions that you can use to overcome them. We also, of course, like to record these so that people, if they are able only to catch a portion of the live screening, they want to revisit it, you can receive that at the end of the session, or you can share it with anyone at your organization or on your team that might have been interested in joining. Oh, my screen is paused, I'm being told. There we go. So you can see here now that we are recording this and that it's going to be sent along as follow-up to anyone who's interested in sharing it or reviewing it. As I fight off the embarrassment and my hereditarily red cheeks, I will tell you about the question panel in the webinar toolbar. Something that we really actively embrace is the interactivity of these sessions. And so if you have any questions as we go through this or things that you'd like to hear more about as we go through these barriers, please add that into the questions panel. And something I've been telling people recently is even if you just want to comment or say hello to us in that to get into the habit, I know that my colleague Ryan is going to be planning to reach out with some more interactive bits in today's presentation. So that's listed off to the right. Hopefully everybody can see that. Now into the presentation. So my name is James Cousins, and I think the most important takeaway from a bio about me is for you in the audience to know that I've been working in the field of data and data analysis for quite some time now. I started out in higher education, but since then have detoured through the convenience of my position into healthcare, into manufacturing, into fundraising, all sorts of different industries, but there really is a lot of commonality when it comes to the use of data in each of them and how valuable it can be when it's approached appropriately. So I'm happy to be sharing that from a lot of experience and my own background, and I'm also happy to be joined by Ryan Orlando.
Thank you, James. And just so everybody knows, I am aware that I look like I am in a disguise, but I promise this is me, and the slide is about me. So it's a pleasure to be with you today. My name is Ryan. I'm an account manager here at Rapid Insight. I have over 20 years of leadership experience, and I've always relied on data to inform decision making, from my military career to my most recent role in corporate loss prevention to serving Rapid Insight customers. And today I look forward to sharing some of those insights related to communication and organizational culture that I've picked up along the way. To get things started, I'd first like to tell you a little bit about Rapid Insight and our analytics tools. So for those of you who don't know about us, Rapid Insight is a predictive analytics and data preparation software company. We're located in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. I like to share with folks that this is the Palo Alto of the East, since there are several software companies up here. Founded in 2002, Rapid Insight serves customers in a variety of industries worldwide. Our customers enjoy working with our code-free and code-friendly self-service analytics tools to easily transform their raw data into actionable insights. In addition to powerful analytics tools, we are proud to also include unlimited training and personalized support so that our customers get more value from their data from day one. The Rapid Insight platform is comprised of 3 unique analytics tools. Construct, as you see here, enables users of any skill level to combine, prepare, and explore their data using an easy drag and drop interface. Predict, which is coming up shortly, is our predictive modeling software, and that allows users to quickly and easily build powerful and transparent predictive models with the touch of a button. We've had customers refer to it as magic. And then Bridge empowers organizations to easily share data-informed insights as interactive data sets and/or dashboards in real time with decision makers throughout the organization. And again, our affordable analytics tools include unlimited training and personalized support so that our customers can get the most value from their data. This visualization represents how our platform works within an organization. So you can connect with your various data sources at your business, whether they're databases, cloud-based data, flat files stored locally on your network. And once you connect and blend and prepare your data in Construct, you could output directly to Predict for predictive modeling, or output to those locations that fit your needs, such as our data collaboration tool Bridge or Tableau, or you may write back to a database or a flat file on your network of your choosing. All of these options are available individually or simultaneously. The tools are built to meet your needs.
Yeah.
And
well,
back to you, sir.
Thanks, Ryan. On that topic of meeting your needs, that's where my role as being on the support team for Rapid Insight really gives me the preference of saying that one of our main focuses whenever we give these presentations and whenever we deal with customers is credibility. And so because I've myself been part of or listened to many webinars that are presented by webinars vendors, I really like to point out right at the start of it that yes, we represent a software company and our software helps people with business intelligence. And so despite that, or rather because of that, I feel it's especially valuable for us to reaffirm that our entire business model, and certainly my day-to-day work, it depends on my ability to relate to users, to business intelligence analysts who need to generate data and have to fight against constraints that might exist at their organization. So when we present these to you, we are doing so in a non-proprietary fashion. We really want to share what we've learned through our exposure to our users and hope that it helps you regardless of what happens as next steps. So we wanted to say that right on the face of it because a lot of times it doesn't get mentioned in these webinars, and I've always hoped that somebody would. So here, having the opportunity, I took it. And with that, we'll jump right into the actual barriers that we most frequently see through our customers.
So for the presentation today, we're going to examine the following 4 BI barriers through the lens of our experiences. And those barriers include resources, available tools, communication, and organizational culture. And we'll conclude the presentation today with a discussion around how addressing these barriers can lead to process improvement.
Indeed. And when we talk about, and I'll leave it up there on the slide for a little bit longer so that you can all see, but when we talk about these barriers, the things that often get in the way of either being able to produce business intelligence or being able to produce it efficiently, our main focus is not just describing how they get in the way, because this is a common experience for all of us. We really do want to focus on the solutions. So as we bring up each individual barrier, our format today will be to discuss the problems and the solutions for each as they occur. So we're really trying to focus constructively on how you can make things better at your organization.
All right, to start things off, first we'll look at resources. So resources can mean a lot to different folks, but for today we'll focus on those dimensions of resources that we can reasonably expect to encounter in most organizational BI setting. To start, we might acknowledge that time is a universal BI resource that requires careful consideration. Time can be framed in several different ways, and if you think about it as a question, it kind of helps to bubble up how time can be a barrier. When is this BI deliverable due? Is there room for unexpected disruptions as the BI project unfolds? And if so, how much? Do the analytics tools resources available support this timeline? And does this BI deliverable fit into my day, week, or month? And if I have a team, who's responsible on my team? Do they have time? And how will this BI project impact ongoing BI projects already? Moving on to money, we consider money as a factor because for some organizations, money is a barrier to BI. Assuming you require a new BI tool to complete a BI project, what's the lifetime cost of ownership for this tool? Purchase, maintenance, upgrades, expansion, and when will you see the return on investment? Consider your wage or the wage of your team as a cost for the project as well. Sometimes that's a hidden cost that's not considered. And what is the lost opportunity to your department, lost opportunity cost to your department for not completing this request? How does that impact your organization? These are things that you want to consider as you look at money as a barrier to BI. And then expertise. Expertise can vary greatly from organization to organization and sometimes from department to department. Sometimes there are many analytics teams focused on a certain portion of the business. You might ask, do I have the skills required to support this BI project? Do we have the organizational understanding to support this BI project? So do I know enough about the business in order to deliver this ask? And who might I reach out to internally for mentorship? Or who should I mentor? It's always good to bring a partner in, especially when you're going into uncharted territory. Who might be an external resource to me, and is it appropriate to include them? Because sometimes the BI project might contain sensitive information. If you're partnered with a consultant or using analytics tools, insert your favorite one here, it doesn't have to be Rapid Insight. What resources are available to you so that you can complete this task? Does the consulting service offer you support or communication? Does the analytics tool provider that you're using, do they offer some kind of insight or support? These are all things to consider when you're looking at time, money, and expertise. Reaching out to you in the audience, what are the examples of the problems related to time, money, and expertise that negatively impact BI that you can think of? If you would, just put in your thoughts or your answers in the chat and we'll go ahead and read them out.
Yeah, and to lend additional voice to what Ryan is suggesting there, so here's an example that questions pane on the side, the GoToWebinar toolbar. But even if it's something common, or if you suspect that it's something common or relatable, like, yeah, we didn't have enough time to approach this project the way we wanted, or we didn't have enough money to get the data that we needed or the software that we needed, feel free to add those in. It's like I had mentioned earlier, we're hoping to build a discourse and to be a resource to everyone on the webinar today. And you'll notice this is a pattern as we discuss each of these barriers, because if you look at the glass half full side of things, each of these problems, if they're going the right direction, could be enablers of business intelligence. And that's what I wanted to focus on, was how you can claim back some of those resources or mitigate the cost to those resources. So one example is tailoring your projects. You can potentially design a business intelligence request or demand that comes into your office such that if it takes too much time as stated, perhaps you can modify the scope of the project so that it does not take quite so much time. It can be delivered on the time frame that is proposed, or with the turnaround period that is requested. I think that part of that also stems from self-awareness. You know, a lot of times people like myself, I get carried away. Certainly when it involves data, there might be business intelligence analysts out there who also get a little bit carried away, wanting to do more for the organization, but being aware that there probably is a cap to how dynamic can this project actually be while still being sustainable. So between tailoring your projects, both in terms of how much is being asked of you and also how much you're offering, you can mitigate the amount of time, money, or expertise that it requires from your team. And then this is my favorite, because I was maybe being a little bit optimistic when I said you could cut down on the time or you could cut down on the money. You can't always do that. A lot of times you simply have to accept the costs that come along with a new project or a new line of projects that you're hoping to initiate. So that's where this idea of using your constraints as your points of measurement after the fact really struck me. So I was working with a customer, a real life example here. I should probably segue better than that. I was working with a customer and their goal was customer retention. And they knew that they had account representatives, and they, of course, can justify the use of account representative time to try and retain those customers. They also knew that they had information about all of these customers, and so there was expertise and time on staff that was already allocated. What they were looking for was a way to become more analytical about that process, and that's, of course, not unfamiliar to business intelligence practitioners. So the goal was to add predictive modeling to not identify just all customers who are coming due for renewal, but the goal was to figure out which of the customers coming due for renewal were genuinely at risk of non-renewal. So because they needed to acquire software, in fact, as it turns out, it was our software in this case, they were looking at the initial cost of acquiring a resource that helped them to build predictive models. And instead of being grateful and then trying to hope it never came up in a meeting again because they felt bad about it, they actually embraced it and used it as the measuring stick once they were able to start to fuel retention efforts. And if retention increased, and in their case it did increase, they were able to point to the revenue that they were able to save and measure it against how much it cost to enable the team with that resource. And it became very quickly apparent that it was well worth that initial investment. This isn't, obviously this is a pleasant story for us to hear at the onset and to tell in this presentation, but I think that the bigger takeaway for anyone, again, regardless of what your next steps are, is that this kind of strategy of accepting and making a note of the things that you, the resources that you needed to use at the start of it, this doesn't just defend the work that you've done, but it also builds trust for future work. Because if you have a reputation for justifying very thoroughly the cost that is incurred with your projects, then that's going to eventually get to a point where nobody's going to question a choice of partnering with you or investing in you as a team in order to help business intelligence drive the organization forward. So with that, we can move on to the next barrier.
Thank you, James. And I'm really glad that I'm glad it worked out well for the customer. But that story covers a lot of ground. We're talking about some of the barriers to BI, and you talk about building trust, and we'll get to organizational culture later on. But every step is about removing those blocks, but also building that culture of trust. So communicating, using your tools, showing the return on investment, all of that helps to get that wheel moving so that you can move into a BI project later on with less resistance or less obstacles. Next, we're going to take a look at how available tools directly and or indirectly impact BI. So first, right out of the gate, we'll look at learning curves. So learning curves don't really need an explanation, but in the context of BI's the barrier, or barriers to BI rather, learning curves are an example of the interplay that James has mentioned. Learning curves can be a function of the following, obstacles, the tools that are available, the expertise, maybe the time, or some other dimension that you can think of. For example, your team might choose to use an open source analytics tool like Python. While this tool is incredibly powerful, a new user of this software is going to need time to develop the skills to apply the tool to a BI project. So we want to think about and consider learning curves as we're addressing a BI project. Who has a learning curve? What is the learning curve, and how does that affect the timeline? Another thing to consider is the narrow versus broad applicability in the process. I've become accustomed to discussing analytics software like ours, or insert your favorite analytics software process here, as tools, because that is what they are. They're tools. Analytics software and processes are tools with an intended purpose, and they should be applied correctly to ensure quality work. Perhaps you have a BI project that exceeds the capabilities of your analytics tools. This constraint, if it's not remedied, might lead to missing some or all of the desired characteristics of the project, and it could have cascading consequences to you, your team, or your organization. So thinking about what is possible with the tools that you have available helps to put a box around what the scope of the BI project might be. And then another constraint to consider that could be a problem in a BI process is cost and maintenance. If you're in the position to consider adding a new analytics tool, cost and maintenance are top of mind, and they should be. Analytics tools can range in price from zero cost for freeware to 6 figures or more for tools associated with well-established brands. In addition to the initial product costs, there's often costs associated with upkeep, infrastructure, implementation, product updates, upgrades, training, and support. Perhaps your organization has the ability to develop their own tools, or maybe leveraging a consultant is under consideration. These two have costs that can start to add up quickly. So just make sure that when you're approaching the BI project, especially when it's adding a new tool or resource, that you're really factoring in what are the costs, what are the hidden costs associated with it. And then finally, another obstacle is stagnation. A sad reality is that in some analytics services or tools just don't grow with your organization or your data architecture. In dire situations, some tools are discontinued and no longer supported by the manufacturer. These factors can also be a showstopper to BI. Surveying the audience again, what other constraints come to mind when you consider available tools as a barrier to BI? And while we're doing that, James, if you wanted to share some of the solutions that you have in mind.
Yeah, I'm really excited to share some of the solutions, but I also do want to acknowledge and thank those that responded to the first prompt and circle back for a moment here. Paraphrasing, thank you each individual person for commenting, but just paraphrasing some of the responses here. One person commenting on resources and how time is a major issue because the upfront prep work for the BI project is not thorough enough, so they really aren't ready to start when the project gets to the start phase. I'm presuming that aspect of it. So that's definitely the case, is that the budgeted time is based off the assumption of preparedness to really move forward, and sometimes that assumption needs to be checked. So that's a great reminder as well. And I specifically, at least I wanted to call that one out because that's something that's addressed. You may notice in the audience at the top here, we have all of these barriers listed out so that you can see where we're at in the presentation. And communication is really where we may be able to speak to some of the problems that are associated with scope of project there. Yeah, this person pointing to a gap in expertise and BI, the understanding of the delivered product. Again, I think that this is, I would say to that person, really pay attention in the communication phase, because this is something that we are very excited to speak to. And then there are some others, money being an issue because of requirements gathering, making sure that it's well understood what's required from a solution ahead of time or BI project ahead of time. So thank you, everybody. Feel free to keep those coming, and also commenting on the constraints that you individually experience with available tools as a barrier. Meanwhile, I'll be happy to share with you some solutions that we had in mind. And again, non-proprietary. Obviously, we represent a solution that you could consider, but in general, regardless of what you do consider, when you're looking at tools, very frequently, that is a conversation about addressing a known deficiency or a known gap or field of desired improvement. So there are so many ways that you could look at an existing tool set, but most frequently, this conversation comes up when you're considering an additional resource or considering replacing an existing resource. So in that process, an easy way to avoid some common pitfalls is think ahead. Obviously, a tool is being considered for an immediate need, but there might be some medium-term and long-term constraints that you could also keep in mind. If you have 2 or 3 different solutions that are viable for your current project, perhaps one of them seems like a better fit for something you know is going to be coming down the pipeline. And in just that simple act of trying to think of what this might represent as far as capabilities for the future, this can help to avoid that tool becoming a constraint or a barrier to your business intelligence in the future. Another factor is, where can the tool mitigate gaps? So there might be a lot of tools that, for instance, can offer predictive modeling, but do all of those options equally mitigate the gap of expertise, which of course ties back to the resources barrier? Some tools may be better in meeting you where you're at when it comes to existing skill sets, so that you don't need to simultaneously bring on a new resource as well as a new staff member to leverage that resource. Because as it turns out, and this is a focus, I think, throughout the search for a tool, is that it should amplify existing in-house skills. And some concrete examples of that certainly have in mind here, but I do want to offer first a quick summary, or ask my colleague to offer a quick summary.
Sure. So, just in summary, you want to, when you're selecting a tool, keeping it high level so we can remember it here, you want a tool that mitigates your gaps, something that is going to fill that need, and it's going to be something that's going to last. Amplifying your assets. You have subject matter experts on your team. Maybe they're not data wonks like yourselves, but they have a lot of institutional knowledge or organizational knowledge that can be useful in your BI project. So maybe the tool needs to be something that can allow you to use that strength to your advantage. Or maybe you have those skills in data science and you just want to move a little quicker. Those tools that you're considering should be able to amplify those skill sets that you have or your staff has. And then finally, this is kind of a rehash, but the tool should meet you where you are. Your organization may have aspirations to be data science savvy with a lot of the latest and greatest tools, but that's a process and a progression. Use or find tools that are going to meet you where you are now and help you to grow in your organization. And we can take a look at a few of those examples.
Indeed. And leading into that, I want to give voice to some of the audience feedback that we've received even already. One person points out that organizational culture for learning to use the tools is an issue. So even if the tool is available and even if the tool is capable of producing the output that you need, the organizational culture to go along with actually leveraging that functionality it's an inescapable reality for people within this industry. So that's a great point, and I really appreciate that comment. Another factor that somebody points to here, communication. Basically the stakeholder engagement, it appears that that's what it boils down to, and correct me if I'm wrong, asker of this comment here. But yeah, communication around the tool set and getting people to engage in what you're able to produce, I think, again, something that we're very excited to speak to initially, but also even more so throughout the start of the presentation, I would add. And then finally here, the need for tools to be collaborative as a barrier. So that's where, again, we're happy to, and here we're acknowledging that these are the tools that we're offering, but we really celebrate the fact that we've seen that these tools help people to overcome barriers. So as an example, you probably have a lot of different data systems that are purpose-built or that have a lot of very useful aspects that help you accomplish what you need to accomplish. So one thing to look for in something like an ETL tool, as an example, is that it mitigates gaps, not just in your organizational resources, but also in your current tech stack. So if you have databases that store the data very effectively, but they don't speak to each other very well, something like this, where you can easily add multiple different platforms in and you can merge them together to reconcile these data sources, would be really valuable and would help you to streamline your business intelligence. Moving very quickly forward here, it should also amplify your assets. So if you have somebody who has statistical or analytical experience on staff, instead of asking them to spend all day building their models, a tool like Predict, as an example, can streamline the statistical testing that's associated with that process so that they can get straight to the detailed interpretation and analysis that they actually, that their skill set suits them towards, as opposed to spending all of that time trying to run basic tests and figure out where they should be focusing. And then finally, and moving back into the barriers after this point, again, Ryan mentions that a solution really ought to meet you where you're at. And so one person was commenting on the need for a tool to be collaborative. And so something here like Bridge, what you're seeing, that would require, that I should say, would not require an end user or a stakeholder who you'd like to see get engaged. In an environment like this, they don't need to run the data themselves. They don't need to put together any kind of report or execute a task or script. They can drag and drop the data and they can start to answer some of these questions for themselves. So your organization is necessarily unique and distinct, and what works perfectly for you is going to change. But when you are looking at tools, look for one that's going to complement the structure and the culture that you have in place. And so with that, the topic of the hour, and I just want to take a quick peek back at the comments that were submitted on the last, and there's a great question I would love to field at the tail end of the presentation here about gridlock to data and access to data. So very happily work around to that. I do want to address communication. It seems to be top of mind for a lot of folks in the audience. This is another case where the barrier, if you look at it in terms of a glass half full, this is the enabler. Communication is what allows you to get things done and what allows you to understand organizational requirements more effectively. But when not done so well, or when things aren't so peachy with regards to communication, it presents a lot of problems. You may find that you struggle to have requests which articulate the real problem. So maybe people come to you looking for a very specific ask or a number, when really what they're trying to address might be better served if they look at a different metric, or if they partner with you to try and figure out the best way to target the business problem. Alternately, you may be in the position of struggling with either delivering data, individual numbers, because that's what people are willing to receive, or delivering information, which would be perhaps your interpretation or what you found to be related to the root cause that they're trying to investigate. And then I think that this even came up earlier as a comment too, but proper understanding of what it is that you're delivering. Yeah, so the phrase from the questions submitted here, a gap in organizational expertise or understanding of the BI. It's possible that in the process of communicating, you may be unable to fully convey the context and define the results that you're delivering to people. And for someone who has far more experience than me in doing so, Ryan Orlando.
Oh, you give me too much credit. I'm going to humbly approach this with some of my experience. So some effective solutions that you might consider as you manage communications are to put yourself in their shoes. And I know you might have heard this, but really what it's about is just understanding what matters to that person or the department making the request. You know, will this BI effort give them an advantage? How might they use the insights that you produce? And then put in the effort early to understand your customer whether they're internal customers or they're external customers. Getting these questions and getting a feel for exactly what it is they want to do with the data early will help you to shape the BI process and communicate better later on down the road. Know your audience. Are they technical? Are they busy? Do they have a preference for communication style? Some people want, just quick hits. Some people want the detail. Some people are just interested in a certain section of your results. You have to understand that. Are they amicable? Or are they stern? In my early days, I remember working with internal customers, and I was being very thorough because I wanted to do a good job. It's what I thought was a good job. And one person said, don't tell me what time, or don't tell me how to build a clock, just tell me what time it is. And I quickly understood what they wanted to know were just the high level. They just wanted the high level. So understanding your audience is really, really important right out of the gate. And then finally, be candid about your results. Deliver the expected results, deliver what you said that you're going to deliver, whether it's good or it's bad, but balance delivering what they've requested with what they should know to make a stronger decision. Sometimes we might need to set them up for success. For example, in retail sales, which is my background, strongest and most memorable background in retail sales, in-store events and holidays and the weather can have a dramatic impact on daily sales. Well, when you're running the average daily sales for last year to forecast this year's sales, I would make sure to include information about past events that should be considered. Was it snowing on that day? Did we have an in-store event? Was there a power outage or anything like that, so that we could more accurately forecast sales, which is sometimes the result of BI efforts. And those have cascading effects. People are building from sales. What does their wage look like? What does their inventory purchase look like? And so on and so forth. So getting it right, being candid in the communication process, setting up that recipient for success with those other bits of information that will help them to make a better decision and understand the context are important. Moving along, in my role as a home office field manager, communication up and down the chain and horizontally was absolutely critical. And it was a barrier in the beginning because in my experience, we were adopting a more data-informed culture. We already were using data, but it was in small pockets. So it was really important to mash the gas and go fast so that we could drive profitability. So as I started out in my role, I was met with resistance because people were just used to using anecdotal evidence or doing things the old-fashioned way. So immediately I set out to understand who is my audience, what is in it for them. It's the what's in it for me mentality. Is the information that I give them, is it defendable? Can I point to where in the ledger this particular metric exists in addition to where it is in this report? Is it accessible? Can they find it? Can they access the reports or the output? Is the information succinct or detailed enough based on the type of project? Is it durable? In a year from now or 3 years from now, if somebody does an audit, are they going to look back and say, hey, there was a mistake. They did this wrong, and it's had this long-lasting effect, which damages credibility and organizational culture. And then finally, is the information supply sustainable? So can I continue to deliver this? When I deliver this, am I setting the expectation that I'm going to continue to be able to do that? Is it sustainable? A common way that I would overcome the communication barrier in my experience was by discussing the analysis in terms of profit dollars saved, rather than saying, because I was part of loss prevention, we needed to stop processes that were damaging profitability and accidents and things like that. Instead of saying this guy is doing a bad thing, I would speak in terms of profit dollars saved and how that could translate into new opportunities, whether it's expanding the team and so on and so forth. Another time, or other times, using BI tools to support the interest of the stakeholder outside of the scope of the BI project. So maybe I want to do a BI project, but I need buy-in from leadership. I want a seat at the table. Well, I actually had this scenario with a manager that I worked with who had no interest in anything that my team was doing. A way to build that relationship was I looked at what mattered to him, and it was sales, and he would ask me to use my tools to build out these reports for him so that he could understand the sales process, order better, and so on and so forth. And I would do that as a way of demonstrating my ability to use those tools and then build that trust. So when I come to and say, okay, if you make these process changes, you're going to have an improvement in profitability. So one way to build that relationship is to do some work that might be outside of the scope of your project in order to get a seat at the table.
Yeah, and what Ryan describes really, I mean, I think that this is something that a lot of people work their way towards, and we hope that this is the way that everybody approaches communication, but that's enabling because it gets around the misunderstanding that might occur because you're focusing on how repeatable and how transparent your findings are. It also ensures that, you know, when the person is receiving the information, that all of the context is being given and that they're seeing for themselves. Why is this information valuable? Why should they invest, even if it's just a minute or two, to try and understand the report that you submit to them or the dashboard that they're receiving? Why should they do it? And this process, I've had the luxury of hearing Ryan tell that story a couple of times as we've been practicing, and it doesn't get worse over time. It's a great reminder every single instance.
Thank you.
And it's a great reminder every single instance because as long as you're doing those things, as long as you're approaching communication in a way that it's becoming an enabler instead of a barrier, you're starting to address a lot of the potential problems that could exist within organizational culture. I'll save all of the fun punchlines for Ryan to share, but I do want to point out that the signs that organizational culture is a barrier confronting you is primarily that, you know, you're having trouble getting invited to the table, or that when you're approaching even large-scale BI projects, if there aren't multiple departments involved, it could be an issue, especially if you can easily point to departments that benefit or that are concerned with the topic that you're trying to address with your business intelligence project. Silos, obviously heavily related to being invited to the table, but, you know, are people using their position within a department as as an ability to contribute to others, or are they using it as a sort of a fence that they can maintain that their efforts strictly benefit the people within that silo? So silos can be a great thing because they collect a lot of experience and like-mindedness that becomes an invaluable asset to other departments in the organization, but that's not always how they're approached. And then departmental reputation. Having worked with a lot of customers and a lot of users, you know, a lot of people are approaching business intelligence in a holistic and a proactive way, but you may find yourself in a position of following up a legacy of people who did not approach business intelligence proactively and holistically. So you may have a departmental reputation to work against and to worry about building back up so that people will take your contributions seriously and want to hear from you. But to talk more about that again, Brian.
Yes. Yeah, so I want to start off by recognizing that organizational culture, everybody starts at a different place, and that each organizational culture is going to be very different. You might have a hierarchical organizational culture, you might have an innovative culture, maybe a collaborative culture, but some of these barriers remain the same wherever you are. And hopefully some of these solutions will help you to build or get momentum moving the organizational culture in support of BI. So some of those methods are to find a champion in leadership, and I'll explain what these mean in a moment, or start off on the right foot, work inclusively, and share success. So starting with finding a champion in leadership will help you to improve organizational culture as you pursue your BI goals. The champion is actually an influential person who will be both an advocate for the BI initiative and a liaison for you and your stakeholders as you implement the project. So that could be somebody that's in a leadership position. I recommend that because they can act as a go-between. They can act as a champion cheerleader for you. They can also be a facilitator of communication and change and so many other things, but they can help you to build that organizational culture around improving BI. Starting off on the right foot, As we learned earlier, getting buy-in from my home office counterpart by serving ad hoc sales analyses was essential for paving the way for me and my team to get buy-in. It worked for me. I was leading a team that also had tools for their individual locations, and I was passing that information along. Hey, this is working to help us to get traction. So start off on the right foot. Make those efforts that are necessary to get buy-in early, even if that means giving something. Go ahead and do that. Be a student of your tools. Understand exactly how they work. Understand the data. Be a student of the organization or the department that you're being asked to build a BI resource for. So that way you can show that you're putting in the effort. You're putting in the effort to support that need. That helps you to build that trust and move organizational culture towards being more accepting of these BI projects. Work inclusively and share success. This is important. While you're building a BI culture, bring your team or stakeholders along in the process too. Listen to their feedback, whether it's the person who's asking for, the BI project or somebody on your team. Bring everybody along. And I'm not saying to create a burden and slow your project down, but get some voices into this project that'll help you to speed up and reduce the number of iterations before you have the right setup for your BI project. Listen to their feedback and share knowledge. Listening might illuminate an opportunity to train and teach your team. You might be able to find one of those gaps and quickly respond to it. It may uncover insights to inform how BI is applied in the organization. I'm a huge fan of groupthink, and I hope it translates in this communication. Not sure where I've heard it, but I've always appreciated the expression that none of us are as smart as all of us. So bring all those great minds in your business together where you can to help to build that organizational culture around BI. Empowering your team can be as simple as listening, or it can be as exciting as elevating their ideas and their contributions. Maybe in your listening session, you found a new way to solve for X, and it just puts you on a different trajectory and helps you to get better value from your data faster, thereby improving your BI project. All of these behaviors will bolster organizational culture, and they'll also help to alleviate crippling BI barriers like siloed departments and poor communication between leadership and management or from peer to peer.
Yeah, and now segueing into questions and any follow-up thoughts, we do want to just offer up a quick executive summary. Traditionally, these come at the start, but of course, I was part of this project and I never like to do anything the normal way. So I put it at the end. And now, put very simply, when it comes to resources, the way to address this as a barrier to your business intelligence is make sure that the projects that you're taking on are sensitive to the resource constraints that you are aware of. And also, as our humble contribution as well, if you're bringing on partners and you're bringing on solutions to help to address your business intelligence needs, make sure that those are light on your resources, that they're not costing you much time for setup, that they're not costing you much money for initial cost or lifetime cost, and make sure that they're making it easier for a wider range of expertise to be applicable to your business intelligence. And of course, that goes directly into the tools that you're using. The right tools, especially if you're thinking about replacing or if you're thinking about adding to your tool set, the right tools are the ones that are going to address today's concerns, that predictive model that you need to build now, as well as the dashboard you need to build tomorrow and the data prep that you're going to need moving forward. So pick a tool that addresses multiple concerns for your business and pick one that is sensitive to the needs that you have with regards to resources and organizational culture.
Yep. And then for communication, just to recap, make sure you understand the question, make sure they understand your answer. Take the time to understand what insight you're being asked to deliver on the front side. Get that done. Put in the due diligence on the front side, and then provide your answer with the appropriate amount of detail and context to help your stakeholder to win with that information. And that can be as detailed and complex, or it can be as succinct and simple as required. And then on organizational culture requires us to nurture both the vertical So peers, those relationships, and also those horizontal relationships up and down in communication to overcome barriers to BI. So take the time to do what is necessary to bring everybody into the conversation in that project. Again, don't cause your project to go into paralysis, but you want to make sure that you have appropriate amount of involvement so that you can build that engagement and get buy-in and start to build that momentum for your organizational culture around building BI.
Yeah, here just as a lot of times in presentations, I appreciate when people take the time to leave quotables or screenshotables or just slides that you can point to. So keep all of these in mind, especially for anyone who's going to be receiving the slide deck after this, the recording. This is really how we would state our case as far as overcoming business intelligence barriers, because if you're able to make a dent or improve any one of these things, then inevitably you're going to be making life easier for yourself with respect to the other barriers. And in that fashion, the entire organization moves forward. With that, I will make another call for questions. Everybody's been really, really prolific with comments and questions throughout, and I greatly appreciate that. If you have any questions that we haven't already addressed, or even just continued thoughts on some of the things that we've already addressed, please let us know. In the meantime, I do just want to make, of course, an obvious call while questions come in. We're going to go back to that slide, but I do want to point out that you can, if you're curious, request a personalized walkthrough of our software, given your own business scenario, your own business problems, your business intelligence barriers. We're happy to address those. But with that said, that quick little call to action, I'm going to go straight back to the questions page. And we do have a question here. Ryan, I'm not sure if you want to address this one or not. What's your value proposition to a federal organization?
I'm going to do my best with that. I think I would need a little bit more information, but federal organization is probably going to be a more structured organization. So it's not going to be a collaborative, innovative environment like you might have with a tech company, or maybe even in some higher ed institutions. I would start with quick wins that can help you to establish credibility. If you are an analyst, I'm not sure where you are in this in the organization, but if you're an analyst and you're doing all the hard work at the data level, then you're going to want to find like-minded individuals that have those same ideas about how to communicate your project's results, and also those organizational ambitions for your organization. If you're in a leadership position, you're in a place to really make some change. Now, there's still going to be structure, but any place that you're operating in, there's nobody that shows up and says, hey, I want that person that is eager and is trying to do more and trying to collaborate. There's no organization that's going to reject them. So be bold. Make that big splash. You have folks that are looking up to you and looking to you for guidance to help them to grow their career, and they're going to see you making those inroads for communication and helping to build organizational culture. You're leading by example. I realize that answer is vague, but I wasn't sure where to come in on that question. I hope that it's a good response.
Indeed. And to that asker, if the response wasn't entirely in line, then we'd be happy to address it further, or even just to follow up offline as well. And I wanted to go through, there was a comment earlier that I neglected to elevate, but I did also want to point out, it was as far back as the resources, so I apologize for the throwback, but time saving as the ROI is another factor. We spent, the example that I shared addressed money because that's typically the most painful, but I think it's a very real concern, and I'm glad that this person suggested it, is that if you were to look at the amount of time that was formerly dedicated to a business intelligence process that no longer has to be dedicated to that business intelligence process because you've streamlined it or you've scheduled it or automated it, that amounts to an equally substantial and monetary benefit for the organization. So that's a great point that I neglected to elevate, and I appreciate that. So there is another, yes, there is another question here, and I'll just read it rather than try and summarize it. I'll just read it out loud here. Can you shed any light on any capabilities that Rapid Insight may have to enable mid-level quantitative analysts, for example, policy analysts that may want to conduct some drag and drop report using report development using canned metrics? That's my fault. And to that person, I wonder, Ryan, also if you have some input, but I would offer up that I think the tools are very well suited to people who want to approach, let me go back to that slide for a moment. It's very well suited to people who want to lower the threshold of what is required to generate powerful data analysis. And so this GIF that you're seeing on screen, this is actually a walkthrough of the software, but anything that you might need to accomplish if it's filtering down to a key subgroup, especially if it's a policy analysis, if you're trying to identify discrepancies in how policies are benefiting or harming certain realms of organizational operation, or even broader than that. It's really easy to key into specific subgroups. You can calculate different fields. If you have, if it's canned metrics, then that's fantastic. But if you need to go a little bit more beyond the pale and look into more advanced metrics that are more circumstantially relevant, then you can also, through that same drag and drop process, you can add those in as well. So it makes it faster for people who can already do it, and it makes it possible, especially for people who haven't yet ventured into the territory of more thorough or more nuanced data analysis. And no need for you to comment if you don't have anything else, Ryan, but it certainly opened the floor to you as well.
Yeah, no, I think from the analyst perspective, your response was great. I immediately start to think about the process itself, like who are my experts in the organization who know the process from end to end and can help to identify maybe those things that are the data is revealing that can be adjusted, that should be adjusted from that BI project that you're working on.
Actually, that's a great reminder, because what I now am recalling is that it's certainly the case that there have been a heap of mid-level quantitative analysis analysts that have formerly had to request data so that they can perform their inquiries and they can look into issues that they're charged with. But in fact, with this tool, a lot of people have been able to make the shift to accessing the data themselves directly, which cuts down the time to curiosity, essentially. And of course, that leads to more powerful insights in the end. There's another question here about, so what about, oh, let me do a time check really quickly. Okay, so this may be the last question. It's 2:59. So what about defining the data and cleanup? Is this at the data admin level, or can this be done at the user level, and can user generated data relationships be shared? And so the answer there is yes. So you can, and it's frequently the case that people have this choice of, do they need to fight the uphill battle of getting somebody who provides data on a routine basis to change the way that they do things? Or is it possible, is it within my time budget and within the scope of my project to be able to handle those data discrepancies or nuances myself without putting myself under a time crunch? And so it's absolutely possible to perform advanced data cleanup, which oftentimes can outmode the need to request policy change on the data collection level, which is invaluable in our experience. And as far as sharing it, you can definitely share the way that our software uses those processes is inside of workflows that can be distributed amongst your team and put into place at other users' workstations in such a fashion that, you know, many people can benefit from the work that you've taken the time to accomplish. And with that, and being sensitive of people's time, we really appreciate it. It's been a very active session, and we really enjoy those. I'll reiterate that you can request a personalized demo. Some people seemed curious about the capabilities of the tool that we represent, and that's flattering, and we really are happy about that. We're happy to have contributed to the body of knowledge, as well as hopefully to contribute to your individual business intelligence efforts. With that, I will sign off, but give my colleague the last word. Ryan?
Oh boy, thank you so much, everybody. It's been a pleasure to spend time with you today, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you so much. Enjoy your day.